best way to describe Run Saber is that it was the Super Nintendo's answer to Strider that never made an appearance on the console. It all revolves around a deranged scientist who creates an army of mutant minions, and to overcome the threat, a project known as Run Saber is set up, which hopes to develop super soldiers, with the game's two main characters, Alan and Sheena, being the only two to survive who were sent into battle to stop the scientist's plan of world domination. You've got 5 separate levels to make your way through, and both characters' primary method of attack is an energy blade that can be upgraded over the course of the game, but both of them are pretty nimble as well and have the ability to scale walls and slide on the ground that make getting around each stage all the more enjoyable. What helps it differ from Strider is also the variety of attacks you can pull off. You have access to an all-screen assault that delivers insane amounts of damage to all the enemies on screen, as well as moves like a screw attack that you can perform by holding up while leaping and directing a flying kick by pressing down while falling. The slide is also more efficient than in Strider. It's where you had to slide before attacking in that game. Here you instead strike all of the enemies you come into contact with automatically. All of these aspects add depth to the gameplay and allow you to approach your situation in any way you see fit. To top it all off, 2-player co-op is also included, and in all honesty, this is the best way to play the game, as it amps up the difficulty, with teamwork being the main way to counteract the higher stakes. Run Saber is a solid action platformer, and for fans of either Strider or Contra, there's plenty here that will instantly feel familiar, so if you're looking to scratch that platforming itch, Run Saber is well worth it. Emerald Dragon is quite easily one of the most overlooked RPGs on the Super Nintendo, and the fact that it never found its way to the West likely contributes to that, but thanks to a fan translation, it's now easier than ever for non-Japanese speakers to give it a go. One of the game's most notable aspects is by far its story, that flips the usual old-school RPG formula on its head, and during the period it was really hard for developers to be able to create characters that you would end up caring about due to the limitations that the hardware imposed, but here you're greeted with an adventure that will stay with you long after you've completed it. I don't want to spoil this, so I'll leave the discovery of the plot up to those that decide to play it and instead get straight to the gameplay. Of course, battles are a huge part of any RPG, and Emerald Dragon manages to mix it up in this department as well, and offers a really unique system for the player to engage in during combat. It sees you having direct control of your character, but the enemies only move when you do. As you would expect, you've got a wide variety of skills and abilities to pull off, from basic swings of your sword to much more powerful attacks that see you transforming into a dragon and unleashing huge amounts of damage on the enemy at the cost of some of your own health. These powers are at the center of the game and become available once you collect various items known as Emerald Graces that are hidden across the kingdom, prompting you to explore as much as you can, and luckily the world is full of intriguing locations, such as the tranquil countryside to the bustling and lively towns that many of the well-written NPCs call home. Thanks to its great script, gorgeous visuals, and deep gameplay mechanics, Emerald Dragon is an easy recommendation that any long-time RPG fan will instantly love. The Super Nintendo was home to a wide variety of platformers, from Mega Man to Castlevania and of course Mario. However, there were several games that never got the same recognition, and King of Demons is one of them. It sees you taking on the role of Abel, who's known as the strongest fighter in the world, and sets out to track down the man who kidnapped his family, before they can be sacrificed to a demonic power. You're too late, however, and following a short altercation, you see your late wife's spirit, who transforms into a fairy to assist you in rescuing your daughter from the demon world. Now, Abel has a limited moveset, which you must quickly become proficient in if you want to avoid being destroyed by the level's extreme difficulty. He possesses a massive high jump reminiscent of Castlevania, a trusty projectile, a dropkick, and a crucial roll that provides you with a way to evade enemy attacks. Of course, your wife's spirit also plays a significant role in the minute-to-minute gameplay, and sees her aiding you by swiping at enemies if you point her in the right direction whilst attacking. As you work towards the end of the game, Abel will be able to transform into a series of powerful demons that you acquire upon defeating one of the many bosses along the way. These transformations serve to offer a bit more variety and strategy to your approach, and are best safe for some of the more challenging moments of the game, where the odds are truly stacked against you. The visual makeup of King of Demons is something that it's also got going for itself. It's by no means one of the most technically impressive games on the console, but the artistic style really helps it stand out amongst the various other games of its kind on the system. Despite its extreme difficulty, King of Demons is one of the best platformers you'll find on the Super Nintendo. Street Fighter and World Heroes 2 are very similar, but World Heroes 2 stepped out of the commonplace mechanics to try something new and didn't receive the credit it deserved. Each fighter, as you would expect, has unique attacks and special moves. Each of them is capable of both powerful and weak kicks and punches, and they can all grip their opponent to launch a range of different throws. In addition, the special attacks remain consistent with the fighter's character. The ninjas can throw kunai, the spirit warrior can call forth spirits to dance around his opponent, and the pirate may launch ships and sharks as weapons. The amount of creativity present in the game is simply staggering, but what makes World of Heroes 2 stand apart from most of the other classics are its two main modes of play. You've got your standard setup where your characters are pitted against each other in a one-on-one fight to the death, but you've also got something known as survival match. Here you'll not only have to deal with the enemy but also environmental hazards as well, such as oil slicks, spinning swords that move across the floor, landmines and spiked walls that all serve to spice up the usual fighting gameplay. Even though it doesn't reach the same heights of the Neo Geo or arcade version in terms of visuals and sound, the Super Nintendo still managed to replicate it rather well. It's just a shame it never received the same amount of hype that surrounded the usual suspects when it came to fighting games on the system. Skyblazer is by far one of the most underappreciated games on the Super Nintendo that flew well under the radar when it released and never got its moment in the spotlight. It's really unfortunate as well, as it tried a few things differently than what most platformers at the time offered, the main one being its story, that instead of focusing on a run-of-the-mill save the princess cliché, was all focused on Hinduism and saw you controlling the heroic Garuda as he seeks to foil the plans of a demonic master known as Ravana. A lot of this was censored outside of Japan though, with many of the names being changed as Nintendo of America weren't too keen on religious references in their games. So here in the West, Garuda would be known as Sky. Throughout the entire game, Sky fights the hordes of creatures by using short-range attacks to kick and pummel his enemies into submission, as well as a few magic spells for those times when they're in hard-to-reach locations. These spells become available the further you make it through the game, and not only serve as a means to attack, but also offer up a way to heal and defend yourself as well. All of these abilities are beholden to a magic meter, which is made up of 8 blocks, and several of the spells can cost 2 or 3 of them, so carefully using them at the right time and not wasting them is the best way to make sure you can always stand your own should you encounter any threats. Overall, there's enough uniqueness and quality in this game, even with a few rough edges, to make it worth a try. Everything seems to come together to provide a good gaming experience, so if you're looking to jump into another platformer on the Super Nintendo, make sure you give Skyblazers a look. The Ignition Factor is a completely different type of action game compared to the many others that call the Super Nintendo home. The main difference between them is that here there's no enemies to overcome, as it puts you into the boots of a firefighter, where your only obstacles are the roaring flames of the fires you're tasked with putting out. It's set up so that you start with a small number of missions that you can do in any order you like, and when you finish all of the available jobs, the next set of missions will unlock. These usually include saving the citizens that find themselves trapped in the burning buildings, and you've got many ways to get them to safety. Putting out a fire requires the use of a fire extinguisher, which must be carefully utilized and recharged to the fullest point before its use. If it runs out, you'll be left waiting with nothing to do. But there are at least a few methods that speed up the process, but since the fire is only an obstruction to your navigation, you'll likely have to wait for the extinguisher to refill to move forward. This is where your items come into play, such as the CO2 bomb that can clear a small area of flames in an instant, or C4 that can blow holes in walls and allow you to access harder to reach areas with ease. While playing a mission, you are limited in the number of supplies you may bring in, and must ask of a fireman in the building for refills or replacements. Nevertheless, there are additional items you may find around the level that may be essential to finishing your task. While it's seemingly a standard approach to firefighting action on first glance, the more it reveals its strategic side, which provides some of the most unique gameplay you'll find on the Super Nintendo. Metal Combat is an on-rail shooter that utilizes the Super Scope, an add-on for the Super Nintendo that allowed for the arcade light gun experience to be had at home. It's basically a sequel to Battle Clash that came out a few years before it and built upon many of the systems and ideas that game introduced, by cranking everything up and adding a lot of depth to the gameplay that was absent in the first game. It all revolves around a power gauge, which determines how effective your fire will be, and depending on how long you let the cannon charge up, you get 3 different different types of charge bolts instead of a single mode of rapid fire. Allowing the power gauge to reach its full level does expose you to enemy fire, but may do a great deal of damage in return. Because of this, timing is the absolute key to overcoming one of the many different mechs that the game throws at you, each of which all have their own attack patterns and weak spots that can be exploited. On top of this, they also have various spots that can actually reflect your own fire straight back towards you, so just mindlessly shooting at the target is a surefire way to end up in defeat. Apart from your gun, you also have access to a few different items that occasionally appear during each fight. You've got bombs, lasers, and rockets that all pack a real punch when used at the right moment, so carefully juggling the power gauge with these optional items is the main way to hold your own. If there was one negative to throw at the game though, it would be its short length, but thankfully once you've beaten it once, the game does offer a sort of New Game Plus mode and allows you to play as an entirely different character with a new set of abilities. Metal Combat is easily one of the best Super Scope games you'll find on the Super Nintendo, and it's just as enjoyable today as it was all those years ago. The Super Nintendo received 3 different entries in the Ranma fighting series, with Skill Dance providing the best of the bunch and the one that closely follows its source material that many fans of the anime will enjoy. It's comprised of 13 different fighters from the franchise's history that all come along with basic movesets that they share, as well as various special attacks that they can call their own. For any 2D fighting fan, it's the basic setup, with high to low punches and kicks being assigned to the face buttons in conjunction with swift movements of the D-pad to pull them off. Naturally, combos have a role to play, and figuring out how each of them can be strung together is half of the fun, as each character differs significantly in this aspect. The super move system is quite unique as well, in that you must first execute a taunt with one of the shoulder buttons, and if it's executed for a proper amount of time without the character getting hit, then the character's life bar will flash and the super move can be performed. As with most fighters, you've also got a huge selection of modes to jump into, such as the story, versus, and tag match, with the latter being a fun alternative, which allows each player to choose 2 characters and enter the ring to duke it out. This variety, as well as its gameplay, really helps Skill Dance stand on its own merits, and easily equal the quality and depth you'd find in the likes of Street Fighter or KOF. With 12 endings to see and plenty of characters to master, Skill Dance will likely keep you busy for quite some time, and even though the original release had a few issues with its frame rate, there's no hack that completely fixes the issue and allows you to enjoy the game as it was meant to be. Ghost Sweeper Mikami is a platformer that's based on the popular manga series created by Takashi Shina and focuses on Reiko Mikami, a first-class ghost sweeper that owns a private exorcism firm that are considered to be the best in town. Set across 7 unique levels, players assume the control of the ghost sweeper, who exorcises ghosts while gathering jewels for a goddess statue who is said to be able to grant a wish should they all be gathered. Being a money-minded person, Mikami enlists the help of her friends to locate the jewels and makes a wish for billions of yen. Now, in terms of gameplay, it's a pretty standard platforming setup, with Mikami possessing several skills. She can attack using a magical staff, and with several elemental power-ups that litter each environment, she's able to upgrade this wand for short periods of time. By doing so, you'll be able to shoot bolts of lightning, summon ice to stop enemies in their tracks, and even produce energy waves that decimate anything it touches. Apart from these basic traits, there's also one special move that is no doubt the most useful, that absorbs all of the enemies on screen into a vortex and really comes in handy for those moments when you're completely surrounded. Although some of the set pieces during each level require some cautious jumping, each stage is relatively simple. Every region presents a different challenge, and since each level takes a few minutes to complete, it never seems to go on for too long. Overall, for Super Nintendo fans, Mikami's gameplay offers a pleasant, dynamic adventure that feels like a breath of fresh air despite the game's short length and moderate difficulty. Seventh Saga is yet another RPG that never managed to reach the same heights of the likes of Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, and all but fell into obscurity. Its crushing difficulty no doubt had a hand to play in it, but going back to it now, the challenge is what really helps set it apart and excel. The game's core narrative is rather straightforward and sees 7 mysterious runes that are known to exist in the world, and each one grants its bearer a unique set of abilities. It's your task to gather the runes and deliver them back to the king, and although though it may seem like a pretty straightforward tale, there's enough twists and turns that make it an adventure worth playing. In terms of gameplay, like many RPGs, it focuses on two main factors, those being exploring and battles that make up the bulk of the nearly 30 hours of playtime. Your choice of a hero has a significant impact on the experience and is possibly the game's greatest strength. There's quite a few to choose from, and naturally they all differ from the next in terms of stat growth, abilities and their weaknesses, which promotes several playthroughs to see everything each of them has to offer. Once you're in battle, it's a turn-based affair with your standard attack, defend and use of items, but what makes this slightly different is that by defending you'll build up power and increase the strength of your attacks, and even early on the enemies aren't afraid to wipe the floor with you, so restraining yourself and carefully picking your moments is the best way to come out on top. Unfortunately, this does lead to a ton of grinding, which will likely turn some players off, as if you're not willing to spend the time in building your character's strength, progressing in the game will become nigh on impossible. Although the amount of difficulty may be a bit too much to swallow for some who play it, Seventh Saga is still one of the best RPGs on the Super Nintendo. That's definitely worth a look if you're up to the challenge. Well, that does it for another video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos which release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skilljim, Shuden, Richard, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, Fake and Patty J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to check the video out. I'll catch you next time.